So yeah, let's dive a little bit into an AI topic, AI and technical documentation, and how they're working together. Yeah, thank you for um, adding the presentation. Um, so I am a technical writer by day and kind of a under the hood knowledge management by night. So I've always been interested in like internal knowledge bases and helping development teams to share their knowledge and not to produce like duplicated efforts, collect some frequent questions and all that, but never had been an official knowledge manager. So yeah, that's why I call it under the hood knowledge manager. So it's not an official job title, but you know these people who are always care about everything. Like they're asking questions, they're trying to let's make a knowledge base article about that. You probably have some of those people in your companies as well. So now you know they're under the hood knowledge managers. Um, so today I wanted to talk a little bit through our experience and how, in my company, we were trying to incorporate knowledge that we already have and make it consumable by AI without doing much of the rework from the point of view of the users. Because if it like will rework it too much, it might become not consumable by real people, but uh, will be better consumable by AI. So we wanted to keep those balance. And understanding the target audience is kind of a cornerstone of a technical writer's work. So when we are approaching some new document, we usually think, who are we writing for? What is the task this person will be solving by reading our document? And now we have kind of another target audience. So one more person is reading our documentation. It is large language models, generative AI. But this isn't new. We wrote for robots before, right? Mind like search crawlers, like various archive, web scrapers, and all that. So this is not new for us. Also, let's agree that we haven't found like one silver bullet way to make documentation helpful for everyone. Yes, we tweak the navigation, trying to get into our users' shoes, trying to incorporate more like testing, like is it understandable or not, trying different things. Like Yulia covered many of the things we're doing to improve the documentation in her talk. But users still ask questions, sometimes like the same questions many times. And this is not because the documentation itself is bad, but many people prefer, like, people have different learning styles, ways they consume information. And some people may still prefer to ask someone. Some may prefer a chat assistant, or some may prefer just a giant search box in the center and no text on the page. So I tried to summarize what we tried in our company, what worked for us in terms of preparing content, no matter if it's internal knowledge or public documentation, and how it could be like cooked to be a source for generative AI responses. I was doing my own experience with the small team of engineers, and yeah, we're trying to. So I want to summarize the wisdom that things that worked for us. So I will give you a really brief introduction, like into RAG and LLMs, just so you know what I'm talking about, like main concepts. So a short summary of the specific is, imagine your knowledge base or documentation is consumed by LLM, it being chopped into chunks of self-contained chunks of information. These chunks then are turned into embeddings, which are basically a set of numbers. So you may think of them as a hash, sort of. Embeddings are put into a database where the search will go for them. afterwards. And then when you write a query to an AI bot, like, hi, um, what is the, I don't know, how it can install, like, I don't know, deploy something using this Docker image. And it is also turned into an, embedding this piece of information. And the database searches to the closest in terms of meaning and gives it an answer. Like sometimes it can be other transformations. Like for example, with the RAG process, the user prompt is also being enhanced with more context, and that's why RAG method, like, is often used for the internal databases and for the documentation, um, because it allows to provide more context and handle the main limitation of the generative AI that we are hoping right now is it being, like, sometimes it hallucinates and tries to come up with answers even if the answer does not exist at all. um, so yeah, that's the basic context. So what you need to know, the main words from my this overview part is information is being um, divided into chunks, and also reg is providing the context to, like, enhance the information and to make future answers more accurate. So first of all, what you can do to make documentation or like knowledge base more consumable by an AI without hurting it, is try to use to incorporate structure and hierarchy. Also, the disclaimer is some of the things that I will guide you through will seem you like, okay, we have been talking about that before. It's the same as writing for humans, and yes, it is. So that's totally okay if you will be feeling like, okay, that's nothing like groundbreaking. But we often obey these rules when we are writing for people. So let's just try to incorporate them when we are writing to these two audiences, like robots and humans. So yeah, a bit more structure and hierarchy will help. For example, you can use headings as pointers. When you're structuring your information with the reader in mind, you're using headings and subheadings kind as a pointers to um, to draw the attention to certain topics, like what this section will be about. And it helps both humans and artificial intelligence, because they know the context and what information will be following that heading. What is it all about? Um, the only difference is that our, like, humans, they can recognize the heading, um, just because it is different from the other things on the page, like by size or the formatting. But people, unlike people, like generative AI, they will need semantics. So the formatting is not enough. So usually you need to mark the headings using some semantic. So it depends on which format you're writing in the final HTML. It's good if you have like H1, H2, H3 on the page. So it's like there's some expected structure. So semantics for AI is um, much more relevant than just formatting. And of course, make your pointers descriptive. They should, ideally, for the AI is more important than for humans, that they actually kind of set the question and then like the answer follows. um, that's one thing. And another thing is that you, sorry, yeah, is to avoid overlapping. So the idea is that you need to categorize your information to avoid overlapping and duplicating the categories, because otherwise, um, getting back to what I've been talking before, when the on the when the generative AI, like the model, will be retrieving the data from the database, there will be a few relevant answers to the questions. So it will be kind of lost and not always produce the needed quality. So you can follow the so-called MISI principles by Barbara Minto, which like proposes to like check that your information is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So you're covering all the information that you need to cover, but check that one thing is not falling into a few categories. It should fall, ideally, should fall on into one thing. And yeah, that's remember chunks, because they're like, if they're very similar, they will be more than one relevant answer. So yeah, that's uh, another piece of advice that worked for us. So we kind of double checked the structure, changed it a little bit, and made sure that the information can fall into one category only. And another thing is try to keep logical hierarchy. Don't just put things into tree or categories randomly. So like for people may like they will make decisions based on the article title that they can afford clicking and getting back and forth. But for AI, often you can pass the additional context. For example, we are passing breadcrumbs. So what are the parent of the page, or sometimes in different approaches you can also pass siblings. This is a needed content. It helps to understand, is the article relevant to answer some question. So for LLM it works well. So make sure that the place where like in the hierarchy is actually logical and kind of illustrates what the article is about. Maybe it should fall into other category. So another part is content relevance and like how up to date the content is. So my general piece of advice and what worked for us is, if you can pass and if you can provide the last modified date or like last updated date on the page, that does not actually matter. Is it just a part of your like HTML, JavaScript like application, if it's like help, or it is done through the standard web um, uh, fields like metadata, that actually doesn't matter. You can do both. But the idea is that to kind of just passing this last modified date is good for the model, because it uses this as a context when generating a response and trying to take the most relevant articles. So yeah, the third part, or what I wanted to share with you today is provide context and organize information as like in this and very like a logical way. Like it is about like inside the articles. So about when I was talking about the structure and hierarchy, it was more about how it's located and like their exclusivity, and this is about like what's going on inside the article. So mind the thing about chunks that I have been talking before. So it's good to organize information from general to specific, and make sure that the information is self-contained. So when it's being divided into chunks, it will not be like partial. So chunks should make sense on their own. And ideally, you have to use complete sentences, because we often tend to omit part of the information, like this thing, or it is something, or just use shortened sentences. So for generative AI, it's more important to use full sentences, provide all the information in self-contained chunks. Also, there is a rule, and actually it's a book by Mark Baker that is called Every Page is Page One, and maybe not that that you need to follow it everywhere, like place all the information on all pages, but just consider and repeat the most important things in a full sentence, even if you think it's like super obvious and you don't need to repeat that. For generative AI, you need to provide more context than for a human. um, and also use pronouns wisely. That does not mean the thing of being respectful to the people who use different pronouns, but this is about naming objects and things. Um, so the pronoun it is tricky. It can be used within a paragraph, but not to refer to the subject of the description in the next paragraph, because the when being divided into chunks, the meaning of the actual it, what is it, or like this thing, anything that points to the important subject, um, ideally it should be just named using a term or its actual name, because again, the when divided into chunks, the meaning can be lost easily. um, The next part is about terms. This is also no different from the way you are writing for your human users. Write clearly and concisely. Always avoid ambiguity, and avoid abbreviations as much as possible. Try to um, always define the term, and especially if it's custom terminology that is very specific to your company or team within the company. Sometimes happen when even one team inside the company uses some custom terminology for the things. And try to eliminate ambiguity and confusion. If you are using more than one um, name for a few things, like for example customers, clients, users, stakeholders, and using them as synonyms, um, try to avoid that, because this will confuse the generative AI as well. Or just know this limitation and think what you can do with it technically. If you can provide synonyms to the model you're using, you can do that as well. Or also good practice to create glossaries with some terms and definitions. And ideally, you need to provide this context not like somewhere separately in the glossary, like in a footnotes or somewhere, but right near the content. So yeah, media contents. We're talking about images and videos. Yes, the models are developing in that matter. I think many of you have seen the GPT-4 Vision, then the GPT Omni model. So yeah, yes, they are developing, but still, this is a kind of a limitation. So try to provide as much context for with the media as possible. So if you can explain uh, with the content around the media, like around the video or GIF or image, why it is here, what it is depicting, um, then please do that. The easiest is like the minimal thing is providing an alt text. Yes, that's all also have been said before. We know that, but usually what we are writing in the alt text is like, okay, this is a screenshot with settings. So they are being supposed to be used for the people with like who cannot, for some reason, um, read your content, and so it's like kind of visually impaired, for example. But they're actually useful for generative AI as well. So yeah, alt text is bare minimum. You can provide more context if you can do that. And tables. Tables. unfortunately, still painful. Nothing changes here. I have been studying the how specific tools like, for example, chat PDF and like scientific paper retrieval AI are approaching that. And this is still not an easy thing to do because sometimes AI manage to parse spatial relationships between cells, rows, columns. Sometimes it gets confused. Sometimes it can understand the context around. Sometimes it also gets confused. So they're usually doing like the table extraction in multiple stages. So like the text around the table, like the captions are being processed separately. Then they're trying to understand the relationships between all the cells, like in rows and in columns. Um, just try to make sure that tables and their LLM perception are tested, and then try to change the format or cell relationship to improve the results. If you can, also provide as much context as possible, like for example, leading text, like leading a paragraph that explains what will be going on in this table. So we are kind of wrapping up my advices, and what I was trying to say is that many things that work for humans actually surprisingly work for AI. Not all, of course, and you need to use your common sense. And when you're trying to incorporate too much context, when you're trying to uh, add too many like headings, don't ruin the text from the human perspective. But actually, what is the baseline is that many of the things that I've been telling you today is actually something that you probably have heard about, like how to make documentation better in general. So yeah, that works for humans too. And also check what's going on in the industry, because it is developing quickly, and probably the best practices, like in half a year, they will change. um, so for example, there is a big direction of like knowledge graphs are developing, and like the integrating structured knowledge into the LLMs, um, and many other things. So things are developing. Try to keep up with the some of the news. Yes, this is a very young industry. That's why this is my piece of advice. Um, that's it from my side. Thank you very much.